Strong foundations. Strong foundations. And that's why I don't know how much university students hear this or not, but like many people want to rush. Oh, I want a promotion now. It's like, no, have very strong foundations, because the foundations will stay with you for the rest of your career. So have strong foundations, because then you have a core, that you have like a strong core, and then you can build upon that core.
You know, this is gonna be a clip. This is gonna be a nice clip.
Okay.
The following is a long open-ended conversation with Monica Millares, the product lead and BigPay. We got the opportunity to discuss many topics like which is the future of FinTech, or which are the similarities between Mexico, London, and Kuala Lumpur. This is On the Long with FVR podcast. If you like this thing, feel free to like and subscribe and to contribute to the channel in the description below. And now, your featured presentation. It's been such a long weekend, isn't it?
Week, yes.
Oh yeah, that's true. The week still doesn't end, right?
No, it hasn't.
Well, it's time to start. 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode on The Long with FVR. Today we have Monica Millares. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it has been quite a hectic amount of days, and especially after all the news we've been hearing at this moment. But first and foremost, before entering into any discussion, people may look you familiar because you happen to do podcasts, right?
I do, yes.
So they want to know who are you and what is your story. So tell us a little more about yourself.
Yes. Well, I don't only do podcasts, like my career is in FinTech. So, yes. So, my story, just to make it short, I am a girl from Mexico City that at some point she decided to move to the UK, study her master's, and basically that was a pivotal change in my life, just like deciding to move. And then basically I say that I grew up in Mexico, but I became a grown-up in the UK.
Okay.
Because that was kind of where I had a lot of growth in terms of personal growth and maturity. So most of my career was in the UK. Then about 5 years ago, I moved to Malaysia. So by now I'm kind of a little bit of a citizen of the world, Mexican, British, Malaysia. So what I do is my career has been in the financial services industry. I started in a development bank in Mexico, then in the UK, same, I worked for the big brands. But then back in 2015, when the fintechs were just getting started, I had the opportunity to leave my corporate job in Barclays and basically join an entrepreneur and start the bank from scratch. That was one of the best opportunities that I've had. I worked with them for a few years. And then basically I moved to Malaysia.
That's right, because we can see this is Malaysia, right?
Yes.
Those are the Twin Towers, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And then after building the bank in the UK, then I moved to Malaysia to help set up and build BigPay from scratch. And for anyone that doesn't know, BigPay is one of the NeoBanks, one of the strongest neobanks in Malaysia, and by now I would say Southeast Asia.
Wow. So you were from the corporate part of the financial services and now you are in like the neo part. So neobanks is something that is like new banks that will become old banks, or are also digital banks that are also new banks.
Yes.
People can confuse.
Yes, that is a great question. So just to make the distinction, a neobank, it started as a startup bank, let's say, because it's a new bank, but the neo doesn't come like from being a new bank.
Does it come from Matrix?
It doesn't come from the Matrix either. It comes from a regulatory perspective.
Oh.
So this is worldwide. You cannot call yourself a bank if you do not have a banking license.
Okay.
A banking license is a very specific type of license. However, there are fintechs that operate with other types of licenses. This is, for example, the neobanks, generally speaking, they have an e-money license that allows basically the financial institution to receive funds from customers and be able to make payments as such. So it is called quote unquote neobank because it is not a bank because it doesn't have a banking license, but it offers many of the products that a bank could offer.
Okay.
That's why it's a neobank. That's the industry term.
Yeah, that's very important to know because a lot of people have been trying to how to get a better perspective, especially from what happened like a year ago, the Celsius meltdown or the Euro 3 Capital that happens to be one of the supporters of that movement. And maybe we are right now a little of prisoner of the moment caught into the circle of the news. But what about those banks that were supposed to give money to the entrepreneurs and now they are not quote unquote banks?
Yes, Silicon Valley Bank.
Uh-huh.
Of course, caveat, I am not the expert in the topic. However, this is my understanding of the situation and opinion. So, just to put context, Silicon Valley Bank is a specialized bank.
Okay.
That means that their customers are startups, FinTechs, venture capital. So they were the bank for startups. They are the bank for startups. It is not the bank that you and I as consumers go to. And that's like number one. Number two, banks as institutions, they basically receive money from customers, and then there's two ways in which they can make money.
Mm-hmm.
They take this money and then I take money from you, put it in savings, you give it to me for savings, and then I have another customer that wants a loan. So I take the same money and I lend it to the other customer. And that's how I make my spread, my gain. The other way to make money is they take this money and then they put it in quote unquote the bank and they earn some interest from that money. So to summarize, my understanding of what happened with SEB is basically either giving loans or investing the money from the bank. Just like with any investment, this is a risky exercise. The moment that you're investing, like your capital is at risk. So what happened with the bank is that they invested at a very high profile, like risky investments, and then the risk materialized. So that's what happened. What also happened is that the banks have a position in the senior leadership team called Chief Risk Officer, the CRO. The bank operated for roughly, if I'm not mistaken, 8 months without this headcount.
Oh.
So for 8 months they did not have a risk officer, like a chief risk officer. So
that's
now we're
risky,
seeing
isn't
the
it?
impact, right? Yes. And then coupled with social dynamics, I guess, where the rumors start that the bank is in trouble, and then basically all of the customers try to get their money out at the same time, and the bank doesn't have enough to give the money back to customers, and then it just like went under.
Yeah, that's very tragic, especially when you consider there are a lot of startups that all of a sudden cannot meet the payroll.
Exactly, because then the impact is like if you as a startup, you bank with this bank, then all of a sudden you cannot access your money, right? It's like if you and I all of a sudden we cannot access our bank account, like what do? That's a big issue for a startup. So it's, well, for a startup or a consumer in any case. So the impact to customers, in this case startups, is big. That's why the startup community, being very aware of what was the impact, they kind of came together. And if you're kind of following the community in LinkedIn, you can see that there is a lot of peer support to see how they can help each other.
Talking about peer support, I happened to see that call by Y Combinator that they really wanted to help other communities. And especially after the solution was implemented, and now they're going to put instead of 250K to 2.25 million as a secured money. The main problem is still there because the trust, the trust for the final product. It's like when you're in product management, how can you make the consumer trust your product?
That is the key question that's been in my mind. Actually, I also write for an online magazine with Marcel. And then my piece of writing this week was about basically summarizing what happened and then my view on the impact. When I write my view on the impact, it's not me knowing what's going to happen, but it's more of me raising questions of what is it that we need to think about going forwards. And one of the key points is customer trust is broken. That's it. Customer trust is broken. How are we going to regain customer trust? And it is not just Silicon Valley Bank. How are they going to gain trust? But I think the whole financial system has been damaged because now you and I, either as startups, businesses, or even consumers, we're like, oh, a bank can go bankrupt. That is a concept that we didn't have to deal with before. Now it's a reality. A bank has gone down overnight almost. So it has an impact on our ability to trust the bank. And basically the difference between us having cash underneath the mattress and putting it in the bank, it's like we trust the financial institution to look after our money. And that is super important. And I think that is the question that everyone working in financial services needs to ask themselves, and is, hey, if trust has been broken, how are we as an industry going to ensure that we gain customers' trust again? Not by marketing gimmicks, but like by real actions. It's what's going to change such that customers can trust the system again.
That's right, because if we happen to see the history of the quote-unquote bank runs, there was like a time back in 120 years ago, or even 110 years ago, that a lot of people was literally putting money from one bank to another because there were like 400 banks. And then the regulations began to be applied, and it's like, okay, in order to be called so-called a bank, you need to meet this criteria. And now that we have the old banks and the neobanks, the customer will like to see which are their options. I also heard that some people want to go back to put money on Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies. But even with this meltdown, people are still taking a pause to go to the moon in the other crypto assets and digital assets. Such a fascinating week, right?
It's been a roller coaster of a week, I think.
Oh yes, that's right. Now, let's go to the important thing. So your journey started in Mexico.
Yes.
So, how was your upbringing? In which city from Mexico? Because Mexico happens to be very big.
I'm from Mexico City. And Mexico City is very big too. So I'm from the south of Mexico City, from a lovely borough called Coyoacán.
Ah, okay.
Beautiful, beautiful kind of colonial type of heritage type of borough.
So does that sounds like right now KL?
Well, no, like I guess like KL we can see, I call this like the sounds of Asia, right? Like you have the bike and it's like behind you, you have like a big city. I think Mexico City also has that, but like just like with any city, there's different parts of the city, right? Like where I grew up, my grandparents, basically they used to live in that borough since they were kids. And it's more like a colonial town. So that's the feel of the borough that I used to, well, my grandparents used to live there. And then me, my brother, my cousins, we used to hang out a lot in, like, grandparents' house was like the anchor of the family.
Wow. So in those years, I believe that young Monica was also going around the city and thinking of studying. So what made you study what you did?
Oh, it's a very straightforward story. I was good in school.
Okay.
I was good in science and I was good in math.
Ah.
And I wanted to study cooking. I wanted to study gastronomy.
Okay.
And it was as simple as I had two big influences in that moment in time. One was one of my friends, and she said, Monica, you're smart. You're good in science and math. Don't study cooking. Leave that for me. She said that. And the other one was my mom. And then she said, because I ended up studying engineering. So she said, if you go and study engineering, it opens up like all these opportunities for you. If you study engineering and then you're like, I don't like it, I want to go back into cooking, you can always do that. But if you go into cooking, it is quite likely that you will not go back and study engineering later. So it was because of those two specific influences that I was like, makes sense. And then I studied engineering.
That's a good way to troubleshoot.
Practical.
Exactly. And engineering. I know that there are very good schools in Mexico. Which one you went?
ITAM.
Ah.
So ITAM, ITAM is a good school.
That's nice.
Yes.
So which is your perspective from ITAM to, let's say, the other schools?
Now we're going to get into
Okay, we know they are the Pumas of UNAM.
Yes, well, in my biased opinion, ITAM is the most difficult university.
Okay.
And it's the best university in the country.
Okay.
Of course, I am biased because I joined and I graduated from the uni. Many people join and then they drop out in a year or so. Many people don't finish. So I'm biased, but in my opinion, it's the best uni. Anyone else from Ibero and Tech, they'll be like, nah! But that's where the nerds thrive.
Okay, that's good to hear.
I consider myself a nerd. I've always been.
So, the importance of a nerd to finish a job is very remarkable. Because you mentioned that many start but don't finish, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So how did you translate that philosophy into what was the next chapter of your life? Because from Mexico, you mentioned you also went overseas, you crossed the pond.
Yes.
So first, what made you say, let's go out of Mexico? But number two, why the United Kingdom?
Okay. This comes back to influences in my life, and this one it's like 100% my mom. She, since we were growing up, she always told us, yeah, you go to uni and then you have to continue growing, you have to continue learning. The next step is you need to study a master's. And ideally, if you can study abroad, that's even better. Simple. It was just like a set of guidelines. She was a very strict mom. So, especially when it came to education. So she was very strong on education is your foundation. She even used to say, I will not leave you, when I die, I will not leave you tons of money, but I will leave you an education. So she was extremely strict with education, so it was kind of the path that she set for us. You go to uni, and then you go and study your master's, ideally abroad. Why the UK? I think that's also because of mom. She moved to the UK to study English for a year or so when she was in her early mid-20s. And she loved the experience because she used to talk about it a lot. So I think it was that, like that narrative that she kept saying, oh, when I lived in Oxford, oh, when I did this, oh, when I lived in the UK. And it was just like, the UK was this exciting place that you had to go. So when it came my time to then choose where am I going to go and study, is that going to be somewhere in Europe, in the UK, or the US, then I had a preference to go to the UK, plus the reality that I paid for my own master's. And the difference was in the UK, the program was 1 year. In the US, it was 2. Financially speaking, like I was self-financed. I got a loan, a student loan, but even a student loan for 1 year is different than a student loan for 2 years. The debt is totally different. So it was kind of practical and also influence.
I'm glad that you bring this up because let's be honest, when you're doing a 2-year program, the second year happens to be very expensive. And you really need to start hitting the ground running even after the summer internship because time is a commodity that very few people happen to contain and get profits from it. So 1 year in the UK, in which city? You were
London.
Okay, which part of London?
So, well, the university was in central London. I used to live in one of the university residences. That was near Borough Market, that it's also in the southish of London.
And in that part, which people favor the team the most?
Oh,
Yeah, because I
I
know
don't
that
remember.
because
I
in,
don't remember.
in
I
London
know,
they
I
have a
know,
huge.
I know.
It's Chelsea, it's Arsenal.
Yes, no, it's not Arsenal, it's not Chelsea.
It's not Leicester.
I don't know.
It's not Leeds.
No,
It's not.
those,
It's
those
not.
are up north.
It cannot be the Manchester United or Manchester City. It cannot be.
No, I don't remember. It's like now you're getting into out of comfort zone football territory.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's fine. It's fine. But it's a fair question because everybody that goes and say London and it's like on the central part, on the upper part, and it's like they begin to do these discussions every time, and it's like
Yes.
yeah.
No.
You do you. I do me.
Yes.
In that time, which was the most memorable moments that you happened to have? It was because of the seasons, it was the people, or it was a plan?
I loved it. Like my first year in the UK, I was a student. It was like everything was like, oh my god, I'm in London, you know. And it was also like in the middle of the 2008-2009 crisis. So I moved to the UK, like beginning of the crisis in 2008. So just being there was like, I need to pinch myself, right? I'm in the UK. And everything was amazing. Like London, I had amazing times in London.
That's good.
Yes. So it was not even like a memorable thing as such. It was like everything was amazing. Of course, I was way younger, and I still have a very like open childlike mindset that you're like, oh yeah, that's exciting. I still have that. But back then, probably I had it even more.
This is quite a fascinating part because all of a sudden it's like the saturation of all the memories becomes one single thing, and it's so positive that it's hard to dissect which one is the best one because it's all at once.
Everything was good.
That's
Well, it was very, don't get me wrong, it was very challenging to move to the UK
okay.
because the culture is different. Well, you've experienced this, right? Like whenever you leave your country, you move to another country. It is challenging because you're on your own. You're not with your family, you're not in the comfort of home. It's a different country, you don't speak the language, you don't know anyone. You need to start making friends. And then there's times where things get tough, don't go according to plan, you get ill, you are tired, you don't have friends, you feel lonely, you don't have money. Like the weather in the UK, the weather does influence like your mood. So it can be very tough living abroad.
I remember a quote, I guess it was from my mom or my grandma, that they mentioned that uno se vuelve adulto cuando uno vive por su propia cuenta. You become an adult when you live on your own.
Yeah,
So I believe that also happened during that part of the journey.
exactly.
And it was 1 year in London studying, but you also start working again.
Yes.
So how was that transition from a student to working in that part of the world?
Yeah, so I ended up living in London 9 years. The transition was, I was obsessed with getting a job in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, what was new to me moving from Mexico was I was starting my master's in August, September. I would finish a year later. And in my head, I was like, yeah, a year later, I need to start looking for jobs. However, what I was not aware of back then was in the UK they have graduate programs. And the recruitment for next September started in September. September, October, November. I didn't know that back then. But then, basically, the crisis started, like Lehman Brothers went down in September 2008. That's when I started my master's. And that's when the recruitment started. So basically, I spent like a full year, September, October, November, December, like until almost the following year, looking for jobs. And it was submitting application after application after application and getting rejection after rejection after rejection after rejection after rejection, just because we were in the middle of the crisis. And it was, everybody was getting the rejections because we were in the middle of the crisis. No one was hiring, and it doesn't sound that dissimilar to what we're living through today, right? So there were hiring freezes, and it didn't matter like you were good or not. There were just hiring freezes. So there was rejection after rejection, but from my part, I think at some point it became like a goal, like I want to stay. And I even remember saying this to one of my uncles, and I was like, I want to stay even if I end up working in McDonald's. And my family was like, hey, but you went to the UK, you did your master's in LSE, you graduated with distinction, this, the other. You cannot work in McDonald's. And I was like, yes, I can. Like I can stay. And if that's the only job that I find, I will stay. So I was that level of quote unquote obsessed with staying. And it was just like persistence. I just kept applying and applying and applying and applying. And at some point it was no, 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 no. Then I could get an interview. I would be like, yes, I'm in the next stage. And then I could fail all the interviews. And I did not get, like to the next phase. But in my mind, every single interview was an opportunity to improve and to get better. Until eventually, I did get a job. Persistence,
resilience, the vision that was clear, the methodology was also there,
Yeah.
execution was methodic.
Yes, all of that.
Wow.
And I remember I finished uni. Let's say we submitted the dissertation end of August, and we had to leave the residence. And I did not have a job back then. And I just had enough money for like a month or so, and then I had to go back home. And then I had a Colombian friend, and then we were like, hey, shall we rent an apartment together? She already had a job, and I said, yes, let's do this. And then my auntie, she gave me like some money. I borrowed money from her so that I could live until basically December to wait for graduation. And then basically I said yes to the apartment. I didn't have a job, I didn't have the money. And within a month or so, in November, I started a new job. So it was like, sometimes it's just like perfect timing. And that changed the rest of my life, I think. Getting the job changed the rest of my life, because then I was able to stay in the country. And I stayed there for almost a decade. Otherwise, I could have gone back home and my life would have been different. I'm not saying good or bad, it's just like different. So yeah.
And that moment, when you got the job, how was it? How was that feeling?
How was the feeling? So the feeling was, I'm going to compare this. A year before moving to, like a year prior to getting the job, this was 16th of September is Mexico's Independence Day. So it's always apart. And then I remember I had Mexico's Independence Day in Mexico, and the next day I flew to the UK. But that year it was like Lehman Brothers was going down like exactly that night, and it was like, oh. And then a year later I moved to the UK, I studied my program, this, the other. 16th of September. It was hey, let's go partying for the Mexican Independence Day. And I remember this perfectly, that I was like, no, I cannot go out because I have an interview and I need to study for the interview. So that I have like very clear in my mind. I was like, no, I cannot celebrate. Like, I need to I need to be ready for the interview. So that's all I remember. The day that I got the job as such, I don't remember like how I reacted or not. But I can tell you it was life changing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really impressive to remember because those little details, even
Yes,
you forget the dates.
It's details.
Exactly, it's about the details.
Yes.
Now, that first job out of the school, how important was compared to what happened later? Because if this isn't the hypothesis to test. Some people say, oh yeah, it happens that it's not about the first job, which is like a stepping stone. It's always the job after the first job. So, how was that story?
So I had two first jobs, let's say, my first job in Mexico and my first job in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
My first job in Mexico, looking back, was extremely key to my journey because my first job was in a bank in the product team. That's what I do today. So when you ask me, how did you end up in product? Well, my first job was in product and I went and I did different jobs and then I was like, no, I like product and I want to go back to product. So that first job showed me what was product and then later that became something I really liked and I went back to it. So that was that. And then, that's why I say my first job in Mexico, but my first job in the UK, that was for me at the time, I had conflicting feelings because in Mexico, like 4 months before I left the country, or just a few months before I left the country, I got a promotion and it was like a managerial role. And I was like, oh my God, you know, like, oh, it's like a manager role. Really well paid, like, especially for someone that had just finished uni. And when I got my job in the UK, I felt as if I had gone back. And it was like, oh, this is like a analyst role. Looking back, it makes sense, right? But like back then I was like, I'm going back in my career. Like I already did the analyst job, the internship job, the analyst job. Now I'm in a manager role and now you're sending me back to analyst. That is not cool. So that was kind of part of the frustration in my mind. But at the other hand, I was like, but I'm in London. Yay! I'd rather be an analyst in London. Whoop, whoop, whoop. And I was working at Visa, that it's like a, you know, like a very reputable organization. So I used every opportunity. Like I was so grateful for that job.
That's good. That's really good. And because you were in Visa, how do you see the people in MasterCard?
We are nice players in the
Ah,
industry.
that's good. That's
Yes.
good. There is not like a
There's no
Coca-Cola versus
rivalry.
Pepsi.
No, on the contrary.
Oh, that's nice. That's really nice. So, a position as analyst at Visa in London. How long that lasted? Because let's face it, when you get that experience, it's gonna reflect somehow.
Yeah, I was at Visa for a bit longer than 2 years. And then Visa back then was structured as two companies. I don't remember right now, but it was like Visa Europe and Visa International. I was in the Visa International team. And then basically in this team, we used to look after the EMEA region. That it's basically Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And basically what happened back then is they decided to close the London office of Visa International. So the reason why I left Visa was because I was made redundant.
Oh.
Yes. So basically, and for me that was a big thing because then Visa, like when you're, that's when I come back, like when you are a foreigner living somewhere else, you don't have your support network. You cannot be like, oh, I lost my job, it doesn't matter. I'll go and live with my parents for a month or 2 or 3, it doesn't matter. Like when you're on your own, it does matter. Like if you don't have that income, how are you going to pay rent? You don't have like your family to go and crash on the couch, basically. So that's why I ended up leaving Visa because we were all made redundant.
And during those events, how did you happen to link up your next step?
I think Well, I think it's coming back to what you just said, like a few minutes ago. Persistence, resilience, and methodology. Like, I do tend to be like structured, disciplined. I just push through. I keep going, and you put pressure on me, and I'll keep going, and I'll keep going, and I'll keep going, and I know it's just a matter of time. And if it doesn't work out, okay, I'll go home. But if I still have a chance, I'll keep going, and I'll keep going, and I'll keep going. So I did the thing, you know, like I applied for the jobs, I went for the interviews, I went for the rejections, and eventually it was a good fit. And now that I remember, the job that I got at Barclays, I believe it was also because, and this is very important, people within the industry know each other. I don't remember if it was Barclays or the following one, but people know each other. So the referrals, asking for a referral, it's real. So when you go through the formal process and they ask you for, hey, can you send me 2 referrals? That may or I don't know what's the impact, right? But I do have experience that in my previous jobs, I don't remember if it was this one or the following one, or both, people hired you because they heard from someone that they know you, and they're like, yeah, she's good.
That's paramount, because we are talking about a time that I would say TikTok, Instagram was still not there.
No, prior to LinkedIn, it was a proper people who know you, not directly, but it's like, yeah, I've worked with a manager that works with her, and then somehow they reach out and it's like, oh, how's she?
Now, I want to ask you something that a lot of our, I would say, people that are in the school trying to get their jobs, have been hearing more and more often. And I would like to hear from you, how was this topic popular before? It starts with P. They call it probation.
Probation period. Yeah.
So I want to ask you, how was after your time in visa expired, and then you got this other job? How they deal with that? Because they knew you were experienced professional. They knew because from the referrals. Did they put you in some kind of thing, or how was it?
My understanding is it is common practice to have a probation period of 3 months. That's it. And it's a two-way probation period. It gives you the opportunity to join and say, you know what, this is not for me at the end of the probation period. And you can just like finish the period and that's it, just go. Or the other way, it's like if they hire you and it's not a good fit, they can be like, okay, cool, not a good fit. So the probation period is just a common practice. Regardless of the role and seniority, it applies at every single level.
This is very highlighting and very clarifying, because I remember some advisors in our program mentioning that probation can be like a one-way. For example, if you're a CFO, you're supposed not to be talking with other people because you're already in this role. But this two-way avenue is like a blurred line to see if the organization is fit or not.
Yeah, it's a two-way.
That's important. Always to give a wide perspective of this.
Yes.
So we knew as a fact that you overcome the probation.
Yes.
So how was the day after?
Oh, it's just paperwork. So it doesn't feel like, the day after probation. It's more like, okay, cool, relax, I passed. That's it, paperwork.
That's cool.
And you kind of know, right? Like, it's not like, I've been here 3 months, let's see what happens. It's more like you have a feel.
Yeah, this reminds me like in the NFL, that if your team didn't make the playoffs at this time of the year,
you kind of know. You know whether you're in or out, you know. Yeah, so it's not a surprise. That's why it's an uneventful day. It's just like it's not that it's an uneventful day, it's just, it doesn't have that emotional impact that you're like, oh my god, I passed my probation. It's Okay, cool. I can relax a little bit and pass the probation.
And I have to believe it is different that from promotion.
Oh, promotion is different than probation.
Of course it is.
Like it is very different.
So during that second part of the career, how was the journey?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, after the visa incident and then when you overcome probation, how was the journey?
I guess like I could summarize like my time at Visa and Barclays. They were fundamental to who I am today because they gave me a very strong foundation on how the financial services industry works as such. Specifically the card issuance, like all the card payments. So I was at what's known as a scheme, e.g. Visa, and the bank, the issuer. So I had that broad understanding of how it worked end to end, and then that was really key for me to move into my next stage of my career, that it's post-corporate and is jumping into the startup world and then helping start a bank from scratch, not once but twice. So that's why I say having that understanding was a very strong foundation for me to do the work in Tandem Bank, and then the work in Tandem Bank was very strong foundation for me to do the work in BigPay. It just keeps adding up.
Yeah, as long as you have the foundations, everything is
Strong foundations, and that's why I don't know how much university students hear this or not, but like many people want to rush. Oh, I want a promotion now. It's like, no, have very strong foundations, because the foundations will stay with you for the rest of your career. So have strong foundations, because then you have a core, that you have like a strong core, and then you can build upon that core.
You know, this is gonna be a clip. This is gonna be a nice clip.
Okay.
Yeah, it's true, because you need to let things cook. Like a good meal, it takes time. Good things takes time. And at the same moment that you're comparing yourself to your future self, you realize in the grand design, one day or 1 week, it's not that much the difference. But at the same analysis, when you put 1 cent to improve yourself, it adds up.
Yeah. Compound.
The beauty of compound interest.
Yes.
Now, talking about compound interest and talking about the banks and these other projects, did you choose the startup life or startup life choose you?
That's a great question. I say it's meant to be. So when they asked me, how did you end up joining Tandem Bank, usually the first startup? Easy. I was looking, they were looking, we met, it was meant to be. It was a nice click, it was a perfect match, it was meant to be. So there is an element of luck. I was not looking for a startup job. It was just the right timing. And I had the strong foundations, and I had the work ethic. So it's not just luck. I was good, even when I was like still very junior, I was good at what I was doing. Since school, uni, like, that's why I say I'm a nerd. Like, I like doing things well and think them through, and I think I have like high standards for myself and the type of work that I do, and that's reflected in my work as such. So I had the high standards, I had the work ethic, which I have like, I believe, like very strong work ethic, and the circumstances, right? That it was like they were looking, I was looking, I was ready. We did a good match, good chemistry, a little bit of luck, that's it.
Now, with that in mind, and because the situations actually were meant to be, this opportunity was in London or was somewhere else?
London. So this is when the FinTech scene in London was just getting started. This is probably 2015, kind of, and that's when everybody has heard of Revolut. So it's like Revolut, Monzo, Tandem, Starling Bank. The four of them were getting started at the same time. So this is like 7 years ago when they were just getting started.
8 years ago.
8 years
And
ago.
you know what also 8 years means? It's like 2 World Cups. 2 FIFA World Cups.
True. Yes. So it's a long time, right? So it's like that's why I say quote unquote, I was lucky. It was chance that I was in London at the time where the FinTech industry was just getting started. And I remember, it's not just that I was lucky, I was prepared, but I was also very courageous. I had I believed in the vision that the leader, that the founder of the bank was having and selling to us. And then I believed in myself and I thought that it was fun, challenging, exciting. Because I remember the day that I left Barclays, they were like, oh, where are you going? I'm like, oh, to a new bank. It's like, what do you mean you're going to a new bank? There's no new banks. What's the name? And I'm like, oh, it doesn't have a name. And they were like, are you sure these people are for real? It's not a scam? And I was like, well, they sound like nice people. Let's go for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
And one thing
It's a
led to
startup.
another.
Yeah, and basically it was taking the courage, right? And it was a risky decision, but at the same time, at the age when we can take risks without major implications.
It's true that there are moments in life that you want to make the pursuit of those decisions. And it's fascinating to see how 8 years can make a difference.
Yes.
Now, during that time, in that new bank that was still developing the name itself,
Tandem.
something that you brought up during your discussion at the school was how to deal in the meeting rooms, because we know and we hear you are a Latin American woman and you were in an environment that was totally different and also men were different. So how was those dynamics in those meeting rooms? This is the time pre-pandemic, so the meetings were in person.
Yes. So I what's the right word? It's not I suffered from, but I used to have low confidence because I was in the UK and I always saw myself as the non-UK woman in the room. So I think it was not only I'm a woman, Latin American, but my personality is very bubbly, very friendly. I'm like outgoing, and yes, I talk with my hands, right? So when I was, especially in the corporate world, I could, in my mind, I don't know how much this was true or not, but for me it was real. In my mind, I could see a difference between me and everybody else. So I felt like the one that doesn't fit in with everyone. So I always felt like weird. And my accent, like I did not have a British accent. I don't have a British accent, right? Like I'm not British. So that was always a thing. And I think it was more evident for me that I was a Latin woman. And I remember the day perfectly. The Barclays Bank building is in Canary Wharf, and it's one of those very high towers, and you have like the lifts to go up to your floor. And there was one day that I was like, oh my god, the lift was packed, and there were like all of them were like men in suits and me. And I was like, hi, right? And it felt like uncomfortable. However, when you say, hey, and then I moved to the startup world and then in Tandem, I think for me, I had many blessings out of working in Tandem, but one of the biggest blessings was that the founders not only appreciated me for who I am and my style, but they encouraged me to be me. And that changed the game for me. Having
Absolutely.
someone that it's like, yeah, you look different to everyone else. You have an accent different to everyone else. You have a style where you're like, different from anyone else. We love it. And I'm like, do you? It's like, we love it. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. So that was a game changer.
It's true. That when you have that validation from the people that work with you very close, and it's like, don't ask yourself that anymore because you do you.
Yeah.
It helps a lot.
A lot.
And also, I remember that accent. Hey, you know what accent means? Accent means how far you have come from your comfort zone. And that is something that more people are understanding this better as time passes by. And how can I forget the words of Commander Cristina Economides? She was my mentor during my time in Texas A&M, and she told me, look, she's like the quintessential little girl from not Pony, Indiana, but from another city of Indiana, going to study mathematics at Rice University, and everybody knew she was not from that area, and still she just did herself. And I guess I got something from her as well. So, Christina, if you're watching this, thank you very much. True. Once you have that like thing, okay, you have to deal with me regardless. then all of a sudden it's like, okay, as long as you perform your thing, we're cool.
Yeah.
Like the quote, the Chinese proverb that it doesn't matter the color of the cat as long as the cat gets the mice.
Yes. Exactly.
That helps a lot.
A lot.
And after that part that was the first steps out of the corporate world, there was a call to go outside the UK. So how do you measure that opportunity? Because let's be honest, a lot of people maybe were during the same time as you were there and they're still there. So how do you realize that, okay, I have these two things going on, what to do about it?
I think it's a common theme that I've seen probably because I left Mexico, then I left the UK, right? And not it's only I left the UK, it's like I left corporate, went into a startup, and then left the UK. And probably that's part of my personality. It's not that I'm a big risk taker, but I get excited. I get excited about life. And I like measuring risk. So what happened back then is Tandem, we were going through tough times financially speaking, like fundraising speaking. And then one day I got a phone call, headhunter. Hey, this job in Asia. And I was like, nah, not really interested, thank you, bye. And then a month later he called me, hey, this job in Asia. And then he said, do you know who Tony Fernandez is? And I was like, no. And then he said, do you know who's Richard Branson? I'm like, of course I know. He said, okay, Tony is the Richard of Asia. I was like, interesting. And he said, and just like Richard, he has an airline, Tony has an airline, he wants to build a bank. So it's a unique opportunity. I was like, interesting. Followed by, and the founders are in the UK right now and they really want to meet you. Why don't you go for a coffee? You have nothing to lose. That's it. I was just open to the idea of going for a coffee with someone. I was not saying yes to a new job, I was just open to the idea of something that I was like, oh, it sounds curious, exciting. And that's it, and I went for that coffee, and then that led to one conversation to the other, and then basically I got excited about the opportunity, and, which is critical, when it comes to making the decision, it was an extremely risky decision to leave the UK. Like, I've been there for 9 years, and now it's like, hey, I'm starting to, like go up the ladder of society, and all of a sudden you want me to leave, to go to another unknown country that I don't know absolutely anyone. It's like, huh? But then my decision-making process was, well, it was more like, one of the founders asked me, "Are you married?" "No." "Do you have kids?" "No." "Do you have a mortgage?" "No." He was like, "You're free. Why did you make this decision now and you just go and you're free and then you can come back if you don't like it?" And I was like, oh, that's a very good point. And even though I had a lot of fear because I was coming properly to the unknown, I didn't know anyone here. I didn't even know the guys, the founders. So it was like properly, blindly trusting. It was a measured risk because exactly, it was like, if I don't like it, I just go back. And it was that mix of excitement with measured risk that it made me say yes. And actually, when I first moved the first year, that it was also a little bit of a roller coaster. It was, I used to call this like hashtag the Asian adventure. All my Facebook posts back then, it's like, Monica is doing this, hashtag the Asian adventure. Oh, new eating place, hashtag the Asian adventure. Great day, hashtag the Asian adventure. Horrible day, hashtag the Asian adventure. Like, it was an adventure. And that's how I managed my mindset.
That's impressive. Yeah, because many people literally they stay on the same place and sometimes they are not self-aware. Were discussing this during the dinner before doing the recording that you were counting that, look at that, it has been not 1, not 2, but maybe 3 weeks that you was being like focused on something and at least you realize it. And there is people who don't realize at all.
I am very self-aware. I try to, yeah.
You try?
Of course.
You are doing it?
Yes, I'm doing it. We all have blind spots, so, right? You cannot be 100% self-aware. It's a journey. But yeah, being self-aware is one of my strengths.
And given with that point, the persistence of the founders and also the opportunity to meet the founders and the serendipity that leads you to this role, once you enter the Asian market, it was Malaysia the first spot?
Yes.
How did you see it once you entered? And don't tell me with the eyes because everybody says the eyes.
No. So before making the decision to move, I came here for a weekend. And the guys were amazing hosts. And I tell to myself, they brainwashed me and I brainwashed myself to just say yes. But a part of that thinking that I was trying to convince myself is Malaysia used to be a British colony. I lived in the UK. Malaysia is also considered more of a developing country. I'm from Mexico, so I know what a developing country looks like. So when I was here, my first 3 days here, well, before making the decision that I came just for 3 days, my brain, what it was doing was like, oh, hey, this looks like the UK. They speak English, they drive on this side, they have the brands, like, it was familiar. And when they were like telling me the good and the bad things about, you know, like the region and everything, they were like, oh, but sometimes it rains a lot and then the whole city gets flooded. I'm like, oh, no worries, that also happens in Mexico. And it's like, I kind of started seeing similarities either with Mexico or the UK. So then I was like, oh, cool, I think I can handle this because in a way or another, like, it fits in my worldview. I've experienced this in a way or another. And that was kind of my first reaction. It is a mix of what I already know, but with a different setting, and it's different and exciting.
It's fascinating because all of a sudden the unknown place becomes the new comfort zone.
Yeah.
You have been growing the comfort zone.
Yeah.
I guess that's an evidence of a person who has the growth mindset.
Yes. Yes, I have a growth mindset.
So tell us about the growth mindset.
Oh, the growth mindset, we can summarize it as life can be challenging, right? Life is challenging. So you have two options. You either have the glass, you know, it's like, is this half full, half empty? And then you're like, hey, it is, you choose to kind of look at the positive side of things, and you strive to improve all the time. Just like in business, that they have like, you know, like the ongoing improvements. Same. It's like in your personal life, it's kind of applying those principles of always improving, without getting obsessed on the, oh, I need to be the best. You have to differentiate between what you want to improve, what you're not. Don't put the standard like so high that it's ridiculous, and also kind of don't make the mistake of saying, I am not good, therefore I have to improve. Growth mindset, I think it's more, we start from the understanding of we're good, we're amazing, and we can all improve. Therefore, striving for better all the time.
It's totally positive what you're mentioning. This in a certain way reminds me the words of David Goggins, because he always motivates, and he has his book Can't Hurt Me, which I recommended very well. And the point that he makes is that about growth, always set yourself goals that you are afraid to make it. And that kind of insecurity, that kind of fear, is actually fuel that makes you meet. Yeah. And that's where you experience growth.
Yes.
So it's impressive to see this.
It is. Well, fear. Fear can either control us, paralyze us, or give us fuel and energy. Same as anger. So kind of the quote-unquote negative feelings or emotions, they can paralyze us and control us. Or they can be like, you know what? No, I'm going to do this. I'm going to show you, or show myself, or like, you know, like, I can do this. So just go for it.
Mm-hmm. That's such a beautiful way to say everything. Now, during your first job in Malaysia, what made you say the honeymoon already ended and then the reality check in?
I never had a honeymoon. I did not have a honeymoon. Since the day that I landed, I was like, oh my god, this is so hard. There's no honeymoon.
Oh.
I did not have a honeymoon. Yeah, it was hard. For me, personally, it was really, really challenging. Like, I think like for the first 3 months in Malaysia, I cried almost every day. I wanted to go back almost every day. And I was ready to quit almost every day. And actually, like, I didn't know anyone. And in the office, it like, I didn't know anyone in the office either, right? Like, you start building relationships. And I remember at the beginning, I used to eat lunch on my own all the time in a cafeteria nearby. And one day I was there, and I was on my phone. And I read, I don't know, the story of ice. I think she was like a ice skater or something. I don't remember the detail, but basically she was a professional sportswoman, and she tells the story of how she has this conversation with her mom, and she's like, Mom, I don't want to do this anymore. This is too hard. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this anymore. And her mom comes back and she says, it's okay. If you don't want to do this anymore, you can quit. I don't blame you. Do whatever you want. It's your life. I only ask you one thing. The day that you decide to quit, it has to be on a good day. Therefore, this woman did is she had a bad day, and a bad day, and a bad day, and a bad day, followed by a bad day, but she never quit because she was waiting for a good day. And then whenever she had a good day, she was like, actually, I still enjoy this. I don't want to quit. And I found that like so wise or inspiring, or that was my coping mechanism back then. And then I was like, oh man, this is like so tough. It was really, really challenging because there's the culture shock. I used to think that I was really good when it came to adapting to change, and that I'm a social, friendly person. So I'm like, I overestimated my ability to make friends, and I overestimated my ability to cope with change, and I underestimated the amount of change that I was going to go through. So it was a proper culture shock, system shock, personal shock, everything at the same time. And basically, one of my coping mechanisms back then was like, I wanted to quit every day, and I didn't. And instead, it was like, okay, wait till you have a good day, and then you have like a clear mind, and then you make a decision. And then eventually, everything is temporary, right? You have a good day, and you're like, actually, it's not that bad. And then you start improving. And then you're like, well, it's been 5 years, so of course I like it. You overcome it.
Mm-hmm. So in the end, you overcome. You use the grind not to be a victim, but to become a survivor.
To become better.
Uh-huh. That was cool.
That is cool.
Yeah, and that's a good piece of advice that we can share right now on this journey. Now, you were in the corporate sector, you started with product, and now you are right now in
Product.
at BigPay.
Yes.
So how different was product then from product
Oh,
now?
it's so different because product then was product in a traditional bank where, well, it was very different but not different. It was product in a traditional bank in a world where apps did not exist.
Ah,
So now when you say product, especially in financial services, like, you mean like comes with an app,
Mhm.
right?
yeah.
So back then there were no apps. This is almost 20 years ago, so it's like there were no apps. However, the core of product, that is, you have to solve a pain point from a customer in a unique way such that it differentiates you from the market. That's still relevant. That's still the core of product, just like the channel in which we deliver, specifically financial services, like has changed a lot since then. But I remember my first week in my first job in Mexico. We were building a remittances system as such. Remittances service and system. And I remember I had a white piece of paper and I started drawing. I'm not good at drawing, so I got my stick man and I was like, yeah, da da da. And I was like, so this person comes to the shop and they want to do this and they do that and they kind of move money here, then they pay, so basically one of my first activities of my whole career was designing a user flow. And that process of designing a user flow is a user flow, whether that was 20 years ago now or like 10 years ago. The concept is the same. So the core of product hasn't changed, but the context of where we are has changed.
That's a good way to put the whole frame together, because people, and this is something that we saw, people will be always saying product, but okay, give us the context and the time frame. And it was beautiful how you put, hey, this happened then, this is happening now. Maybe the fundamentals are still there, but the end result and the customer that is using are totally
Very
different.
yes.
Yeah, that's totally true. So now you are working on product, and some people know you because you are doing podcast. So where the podcast entered the equation?
Oh, the podcast entered during COVID. It
Okay.
became a passion project during COVID, survival project, because as many of we know, COVID was very tough. It was just tough. And as part of that process, at some point I was like, well, I need to talk to people. I'm a friendly, sociable person. I need connection. That was one thing. And the other thing was, since many, many, many years ago, I've been doing coaching as well on the side. And I love like coaching, personal development. And as part of that, I experimented with doing some videos. And as part of that journey many years ago, I was like, oh, I would love to have a talk show. I used to say that. I would love to have a talk show. It could be so cool. So when COVID comes, and even before COVID, when I was still in the UK, I asked one of my managers in the bank, one of the founders of the bank. He did not have a background in financial services. He had a media background. So I was like, hey, I want to start a talk show. What do I need? And he was like, well, you either need a very large audience to attract people, or you need to be like subject matter. Like you need to have this value that it's unique. And I was like, oh, okay. But then things have changed. Technology has been changing super, super, super fast, and it changes extremely fast these days at a weekly basis almost. So during COVID, I was like, oh, wait a second, this is going to be like a digital acceleration. Like everything is going to go digital very, very fast. And I needed connection, and then I needed to talk to people, and I was invited to a podcast.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, this is cool. It was just the audio. So I was like, oh, I don't need to dress up. I don't need to think about the setting nor the lights. I don't need to edit. It's so much easier. So I was like, oh, cool. I've always wanted to start a talk show. Let's start one. And I just grabbed my phone and I did the first recording. I listened to it and I was like, oh, this is crap. Because you can hear like the noise and it's very difficult to talk for like 5 minutes. That's it, and that's how it started. And then I think it became like my therapy during COVID, because then I had something to do within the craziness of COVID, and I was like, oh, I was learning. I like studying, so I was like learning something new, and I was studying this and editing, and like I'm still not as good as I would like to, so that's amazing because I still have a lot of scope for growth. And that's how it started.
So, how's it going now?
I love it. It started as a passion project. It started as a COVID project. It turned into therapy project. Then it turned into a passion project. And by now I'm like, I love it. It's just like part of what I do, right? And it's constantly evolving. I'm in the process of wrapping up the current podcast and saying this is going to be the last 2 episodes. I'll close that because the podcast has also evolved. The topic of the podcast has evolved over 2 years now. And then I'll say, okay, cool, let's close this one, step back, rethink what is it that you want to do now, absorb all the learnings that you've had in these past 2 years, and now let's launch a new podcast. And the new podcast is going to be very specific to FinTech product and the journey and the challenges in the industry.
You're doing right now an exclusive. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
This is like a breaking news. So, are you gonna share this on YouTube and Spotify?
Yes, everything like Spotify, YouTube, TikToks, the usual suspects.
Oh yeah, the usual suspects. And then all of a sudden, Spotify sends you a check for $1 million.
We hope so.
Hey Spotify, link her up with something, okay? That's pretty cool.
It is cool. I like it. It's cool. It's a hobby. I have fun. It's creative expression.
Now,
I
talking
like it.
about being creative, we just happened to be creative right before recording. With such a sterling view, I mean, how did you came out with so many years in KL? All of a sudden, oh, this can be the place.
Oh, I'm practical. I'm very practical. So when I moved here, I chose the location where I was going to live based on where the office was located. So basically, I chose a place that it was close to the office. Nice commute. That's it.
I remember from some people in the past that they told me that you should go and live where the action is. And the second order question was like, okay, define action. Is before work or after work? And some people say it has to be a compromise between during the work and what happens after, because your life happens.
And yes, and I think it also depends on where you are in life. I think I've also matured. So let's say 5, 7, 10 years ago, I used to go out a lot. Now I don't. I'm very happy going to work, then cooking, doing my podcast, meeting friends once a week. Like, I don't need to be where all the bars are, because I don't love going to bars anymore. I'm more like, oh, let's go for dinner. And where I live now, it's like plenty of places for dinner.
I'm glad you bring this up because a lot of people will be always trying to measure this balancing effect, work-life balance, and the so-called tyranny of the or, because it's either this or that. So how can you actually escape the tyranny of the or and balance that?
It's an ongoing conscious effort. Many years ago, I heard this philosophy that they said we cannot achieve balance because when you are balanced, you're kind of dead. There's no ups, there's no downs. It's just like beep. Instead, we should strive for harmony. And I thought that was a great concept because then I can work as much as I can, as I want. And yeah, it may be a little bit more than the average people, but less than many other people. But that works for my life. And yes, sometimes I do work a lot, but that's, like, it's okay. Because then it's like, I have harmony. Like, I work, but I look after my health, and I do the fitness thing, and I do the eating well thing, and I do the hobbies, and I do the friends, and like, there's harmony. It's not balance, it's harmony. So that, and I think you do need to actively manage it and be aware of your behaviors to ensure that you don't drop one of those balls.
This is insightful. Why? Because a lot of people have been thinking that yes, they're gonna burn themselves for so long and then they're gonna retire in a tropical island. That's not happening.
The world has changed.
And it's like you either have growth or you have comfort. In the comfort place you have no growth, but in the growth you have no comfort. And it's like,
I think, the secret to that is getting comfortable being in discomfort.
mm-hmm.
It happens, like in the startup life, you are constantly in discomfort. But then many people panic. So, for example, sometimes I tell my friends, oh, this year, this and this happened. And they're like, oh my God, Monica, how can you do that? Live like that always. I'm like, just get used to it. You get used to living in uncertainty and in discomfort. And then once you're comfortable dealing with uncomfortable, then it gets easier. Not easy, but easier.
Yeah.
Because you know it's temporary. And it's always a cycle. It's always a cycle. You'll come back to that and then you'll be happy and then everything is smooth and chill and then it's chaos again and then it's like chill and smooth. Chaos, it's chill and smooth. It's a cycle.
So talking about cycles and talking about also being prepared not only mentally but also physically, you mentioned also about fitness. So how can you balance fitness and what fitness you have been practicing recently?
Yeah, that's what I've been struggling with for the past few years. Just because I don't build the habit of going to the gym, let's say 5 times a week, which is a lot. But what has been a good in the middle solution for me is focusing on holistic health rather than just on fitness. And I practice a lot of stacking habits. So I eat well, I eat quite healthy. I drink my water. Sleep. I try to go to sleep before 11:30. Sometimes I don't, but it's okay, right? But then it's like steps. This watch has helped tons.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, oh, at some point during COVID, I was like, hey, I'm doing 2,000 or less than 2,000 steps a day. That is very bad. Now my average, without doing anything, is 5. But in a good day, it's 8. In an amazing day, it's 15. And how I'm focusing on those steps is little things like I take the train to work. I don't take the car. So it's just incorporating those little habits. I believe in the power of microactions. So that's how I manage, I think, my whole growth, personal and professional. It's microactions. Coming back to compound interest, it's like compound actions. And that's it, and that's how I do the harmony/balance compound of microactions.
As a start, you describe a new equation.
No.
It's true. I personally do a lot of running because in the past I used to play a lot of football, and I realized that can be a little taxing on my body. The chances of getting an injury can be very unforgiving. So, for example, I methodically pace myself to train hard in the on season, let's say for a marathon, like the Kuala Lumpur Standard Chart. But then I need the body to rest.
Yes.
And then
Rest is important.
keep a balance so you keep always yourself active, and also the influence of a natural light. I welcome that a lot. Like I remember when Walker was still here. Walker, if you're watching this, you are right now being mentioned. She usually was like, okay, let's go and walk in the morning, and it was still dark, but then we got the natural light. It really created a positive impact.
It does, it does, it does, it does.
And at the same time, don't burn yourself too much. Let the body to rest, but don't rest too much because then you
Too
get
comfortable.
yeah. It's like a balance.
Yes.
This is the pretty part because it's what happens in the physical part also happens in the mentally part.
Yes.
It's intertwined. Now, talking about things that are intertwined, and now that you're bringing that you are about to build a new podcast, what else are you building?
Well, podcast. You need to focus. When you have a demanding career, you need to focus on anything else outside. You cannot. Well, I feel that it's. I'm building my fitness. That's what I'm building.
Uh-huh.
Building my fitness and my healthy habits that I improve day by day. I'm very proud of that. And the podcast.
That's right. Now, this can be a little personal, so I hope you allow me to ask you this. But I remember during the setup, you said, let me go for my earrings. And those happens to be the same earrings you used back then. So if there is a story behind those famous earrings?
These are the. I like these earrings. They're kind of Malaysian inspired handmade earrings.
Oh,
Yeah, so I like the designer. Like she has really cool designs. I have 3 of her
wow.
earrings, and I just like them.
That's impressive. So where do you get them? Or how was the story? How did it was like, okay, I got them.
There's no major story. I got them in the shop. Like there's no a lot of depth behind these. It's just they're cool.
That's very cool. That's very cool.
They just look cool.
It's like a very natural expression. Like, yeah, I just want to put that. That's it. That's very cool. Now, a lot of people have been watching this. They have been following you on LinkedIn as well. And we can say that also some young Monicas will be watching this. So, any piece of advice you want to give to your younger self?
In which area?
You can choose.
Look after your finances. They're more important than you think. I think it's that. Like we think we're going to be young forever. We kind of do, right? Like I feel like I'm 20. I'm like, I'm full of energy. But in reality, it's like if we manage to stay alive, we will not be young forever. We will reach 30, 40, 50, 60. And then the body changes, the job dynamic changes, the future is very uncertain, the economy is uncertain. If we start building financial habits since we're very young, that puts us in a powerful place. So what I wish younger Monica would have done is like to have a stronger focus on her financial goals since she started uni. That was number 1. And number two is since she started uni, someone like me, she was always like I was a nerd. So I was the best in school. I started working and I was like the best with all the awards at work, right? And I worked really hard. What I wish my 20-year-old Monica would have done in addition to looking after her finances was to start a side hustle that gives some extra income. Because of 2 reasons. One is our identity in this modern society for the type of people that go to uni and then get a job at least. Our identity is very tied to work. So when work doesn't go well, you're fired, you lose a job, there's stress, there's this, the other. Our core of who we are is like shaken up. However, if you have a side hustle, side project, you're not work only. Yes, I'm Monica, the FinTecher working in product. Yes, I am. And I am also Monica, the podcaster. So my identity has a balance as well. It's like diversifying your portfolio, you also diversifying your identity, and don't put all the value in your job. And that's why a side hustle, I found that it's very important. It helps with identity. And at the same time, if you manage to have an income out of that side hustle, then it gives you some peace of mind that you have an extra income. So I think that's a message that it's important that we start talking more about, that it's financial well-being is extremely important. And I wish I could have started earlier.
Wow. Monica is literally telling everybody right now, be your own hedge fund manager. Hedge the risk you have in your own life and manage accordingly to always get the best return. That's a very well and powerful sentence.
Yeah, it's like, think of finances. Do look after your financial life. It's very important. It will open options.
Oh yeah, that's true. I cannot find a better way to find a closer to this episode. How can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Monica Millares. You can find me on TikTok, Moni Millares, but I'm mainly on LinkedIn. And then if you follow me there, you'll see my updates on my content, updates on the podcast, updates on upcoming stuff, the newsletter. I also write for a FinTech newsletter. So that's my digital home, LinkedIn. That's the easiest way. We can connect and you can drop me a message. I always respond.
Monica, I really enjoyed doing this.
Thank you, Fabian. It's been a pleasure.
So for people out there, please stay safe and see you when I see you. Bye.